Hello there everyone, welcome back to my channel. Thank you all very much for joining me today. Now with today's video for Dissidia Final Fantasy Opera Omnia, it's actually one that I've been looking at making for a little while, but I thought that it would be best to kind of leave it until it was fresh in everybody's minds, because with the dawn of the new weapons event coming out tomorrow with Squall, with bursts and LDs, and lots of new things to pull for, and a brand new power creep era in the game, I thought it would be a good idea to present an ultimate guide to everybody for bursts and LDs to help you guys navigate what exactly LDs and bursts actually are and how they benefit you, how you go about pulling for them, how you go about equipping them and getting the most out of them, as well as a few questions that I've been asked over the course of the past few days in order to help clarify certain things that perhaps were not clear before. So if you guys want to know everything there is to know about burst weapons and limited or LD weapons, then stay tuned and keep on watching. As with every video, of course, guys, don't forget to check out all of the social media links in the description box below, including Twitter, Twitch, Patreon, and Discord. On Twitch this week, I will be streaming Squall's brand new event tomorrow as it comes out, so if you want to come and check me out on there, then feel free to come and do so. I'll also be playing some Final Fantasy 9 this Saturday night and some Final Fantasy 14 on Sunday, so I'll be branching out and you guys can come and join in with something a little bit different as well. As with Patreon, I always shout out one of my patrons at random every time I make a video so that I can extend my thanks to every person that decides to support the channel further, and today that person is going to be ABC, who quite nicely has picked Beatrix as his banner, as the choice of character on his banner, and we all know how much I love Beatrix. So thank you very much for your support, ABC. And of course, as always, don't forget to check out all of the social media links that there are as well for other content creators, so things such as OO Tracker, Tombury Troop, Dissidia DB, Dissidia Info, and all that good stuff there is for Opera Omnia out there. And of course, there are loads of other content creators out there besides myself, so be sure to go and check them out too. So first things first, let's actually properly cover what LD and BT, or limited and burst weapons, actually are. And in order to describe these, I'm actually going to use Squall as an example so I can showcase exactly what these things do for you. Now, as opposed to 15 and 35 CP weapons that enhance skills that you already have, these, much like EX weapons, grant an entirely new skill for you that you can use throughout the course of battle in order to make things sort of do damage, present effects, anything like that. LD weapons present a very limited use ability that you cannot really regain the abilities, or you can't get free uses out of them from other skills that would ordinarily do so because they're considered a little bit too strong to do so. So in Squall's case, he gets the Rough Divide ability, which is a hard-hitting attack that gives him a new buff that makes it so that he does more damage and he has more Brave Overflow on his skills. And when you use Power Stones to limit break an LD weapon, because you don't need, like EXs, you don't need ingots or books or anything like that, you still only need those 4 EXs in order to turn them into the EX Plus variant. LD weapons only require Power Stones in order to max them out. But every time you limit break them, you get something similar to what you would get when you limit break an EX or EX Plus weapon, where you get additional effects. Now, most of these will obviously boost the LD attack itself, whereas some of them will actually boost other aspects of your character as well, much like EX Plus did before it. So in Squall's case, if you fully max out the LD weapon, you actually get stronger Brave and HP attack pluses in order to go with the stuff you get. So not only do you get this brand new attack, you also get enhancements to the rest of a character's kit as well through just limit breaking an LD weapon. So they're actually really quite important and quite significant, and like the powers that we've had before, you're going to want to try and have as much of a complete kit as possible when it comes to these particular weapons. The last thing that I'll mention about LD weapons, and I'll go into great deal with this when I come to actually talk about equipping these weapons, is that they are actually statistically weaker than EX weapons are, or at least EX Plus weapons. So like systematically, you're probably not going to equip an LD weapon, you're probably going to grab it, well hopefully, max it out with Power Stones, and then probably resell it and get some of the Power Stones back, because much like any of the other weapons, EX, Burst, LD, 15 CP, 35 CP, once you've maxed this weapon out, you'll gain the passive, which will allow you to equip that skill that you would have gained from the LD. And it also costs 0 CP to equip, so it's not something that you have to worry about when it factors into your CP management. You will most likely grab an LD weapon, max it out, and then sell it back off again. Now, burst weapons are a much stronger but also much rarer weapon that will come around and will be featured across multiple banners as opposed to the LD weapons that are featured for protagonists and antagonists of mainline Final Fantasy titles and certain spin-offs. Well, we know Ramza has had one, so there's still hope out there for Lana and Rain, Vincent, Yuna, Zack, that kind of thing. But currently, most of the weapons that have been released are released only for protagonists and antagonists. So, to use Squall as an example, equipping his burst weapon will give him another new attack, but it will just say burst underneath it. And what burst actually does is it puts you into something very similar to a summon. So you get like an alternate turn order where only that character using the burst where it will come up with 6 consecutive turns and the music will change and the background will change, so that it also like gives you more of like a triumphant feel toward the character that you've picked for this. And you'll be able to use each of that character skills once each. So it's like their regular skills, their EX is fully charged, you can use their LD again, which is actually a very prominent part of the burst because LD uses are very, very scarce, and therefore getting an extra one out of the burst is actually very, very nice. And then once you've taken up each of those skill uses, you'll then get on the 6th turn a finishing burst, which is an attack that's specific to the burst weapon itself, and it will do a massive attack and it will exceed the damage limit and both bravery and HP, so you'll be able to do a huge amount of damage with both of them. And then once that attack has been done, you'll also be left with a party-wide effect that is left by the burst that differs depending on which character is using it. So in the case of Squall, for example, using his burst will give you a party-wide effect that increases the amount of HP damage dealt by AoE damage dealing attacks, whether it come from Squall or anyone else in your party. Now, different characters all do different things with their bursts, so like doing research or perhaps checking in with videos that I've made or anything like that with Should You Pulls will help you guide which characters you actually want in order to get the burst, because they are extremely rare. Now, while you're doing the burst, it's important to note that certain characters obviously can refresh skills with their EX or their LD or give themselves free skill uses, and you'll be able to do that within the burst. If you wanted to use a particular skill more than once, then there are ways for you to do that. Buffs, debuffs, things like that, they don't count down during your burst either. So if you're like wanting to keep hold of a particular buff, then you'll be able to keep hold of it throughout the burst as well, which is actually extremely helpful. But with bursts, it's a lot easier to go for an LD than a burst because they're so rare. So the rates of them, you're looking at like 0.1% when it comes to tickets. So you're looking at like, to even attempt 100% guarantee it, you're looking at 1,000 tickets, whereas opposed to LD weapons, which have the same rarity as what EX weapons had before, and EX weapons will now become slightly more easy to acquire. So how you go about bursts and LDs and how you pull for them is something that I'm going to cover very shortly. But for the time being, I just wanted to kind of go over exactly what LDs and bursts are before we start discussing the strategies behind doing anything with them. So now we're going to discuss exactly how you're going to manage let's say you get an entire kit for somebody. You get their EX, you get their LD, you get their burst, you've got all their skills maxed out, everything. How do you optimize exactly what you've got from each of these weapons? So, as I said earlier, the LD weapon is actually weaker statistically than an EX plus weapon is. It also provides slightly less CP to your character. However, a burst weapon is stronger than an EX plus and also provides a fair amount more max CP to the character after you've leveled them. So, if in the example of using Squall, and actually Square Enix themselves provided this fantastic slide to kind of demonstrate what I'm trying to say here during the community stream. So what you would want to do is, if you get EX, LD, and Burst, you're wanting to, first of all, put your Power Stones into your LD, make sure that you get the passive from it, and then you'd probably just sell it back off again. Because it's weaker than the EX+, so you're probably not going to use the LD regardless, and if you have a Burst, you're definitely not going to be using it. Then you just sell it back off again. Much like you did with 15 CP and 35 CP weapons before now, once you'd acquired an EX weapon. Then the EX, you're going to want to max that out, turn it purple, Power Stones it to the point where it can be realised, EX+, give it a book, give it the 3 ingots that it needs in order to max out the EX skill, because the EX skill is still the only rechargeable and therefore technically infinite attack that you have in your kit. LD abilities have skill uses and very few of them, and the bursts can only be used once throughout an entire fight. So managing your skill uses is actually going to be more important now than ever, so that your EX is most definitely not redundant after getting LD and Burst. You are going to want a complete kit for as many characters as possible, at least up until the Burst. Like, there are characters where you can not have the Burst and it'd be fine, but you're going to want, if you're wanting to use a character regularly, you're at least going to want their EX and their LD. Then if you don't have the Burst, then you can just equip the EX Plus and be done with it. And then you just go about getting your artifact management, going about like getting your character boards done, your summon boards, everything in order to max out the character. If you do have the Burst, then you can sell off the EX Plus weapon as well, and then you can equip the Burst. Well, we couldn't sell EX Pluses until recently, and a lot of people I noticed are quite excited about the fact that you can sell EX Pluses in order to get an ingot or enough nuggets to make an ingot back. This is actually not recommended for a lot of cases unless you have a burst weapon. If you have a burst weapon for that character, you will then want to equip that because it has the highest attack that you can get and the highest max CP. That is the only circumstance in which you are going to want to sell a fully realized purple EX weapon, because otherwise you're just going to be equipping something that's weaker than the EX weapon that you would have given them in the first place. So unless you have a character that you're really not fussed about, like you regret purpling or something like that, and you really regret it that much that you would want one ingot back, because bear in mind you put 3 and a book into it, it's very diminishing returns. So honestly, there are very few circumstances, unless you have the burst weapon for that particular character, in which I would recommend selling an EX Plus. Otherwise, as I said, shorten it down, get EX, get LD, max out LD, sell off LD, max out EX Plus, equip EX Plus. If you have burst weapon, then sell EX and then max out burst weapon using just power orbs. It does take quite a lot of power orbs to max out a burst weapon. You don't need power stones, you don't need ingots, you don't need books, you don't need anything for burst weapons, you just need power orbs. Though using the typical 4-star ones that we've got, you're looking at around 1,000 of them, so be prepared to level them up in quite a large chunk. So now we're going to talk about something that I know a lot of people have asked me a lot of questions about, and it's how they plan to pull for LD and burst weapons. Now, first things first, I'm going to show you the draw rates. Now, I know I showed the people this during my August overview, but I feel that this is a great place to put it. The rates of the things that you can pull on a banner change with the dawn of bursts and LDs. So EX weapons rates are increased from 0.5% to 0.75%. So as opposed to 1 in roughly every 200 tickets, you're looking at roughly 1 in 120, which is great. And then banners will change themselves from this point to feature a character's LD and then 3 EXs. So every character on a banner will at least have their EX weapon available. So for those people who are trying to play catch up, it's going to be a great time for you to do that, because EXs you'll probably find you'll be pulling a lot of EXs you didn't really want by accident while you're trying to go for a character's LD, and if they're a new character, their EX as well. So the only thing that really we lose to compensate for this increase in rates for the EX weapon is the rates of 15 CP weapons have gone down slightly, and off-banner weapons have been eliminated entirely. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I am extremely pleased about the fact that off-banner weapons have been eliminated, because I swear to God, if I see one more Chocoblade or Thancred 15 when I'm trying to pull for something else, I will rip the rest of my hair out. But then 15 CP weapons are also the weapons that you typically get during an event, which means that, well, at least that's the one that I would have been able to get anyway, and I can just use power stones elsewhere. So it would have been, that's really the only thing that we've lost for that. LD weapons now have the same rate that EXs had before now, which was 0.5%. So you're roughly looking at 1 in every 200 tickets. Obviously, these are very subjective rates and things like that. Some people are going to get LDs in 5 tickets. Some people are going to do a snow and it cost like 450 odd. So like some people, it may even cost more than that. But roughly, you're looking at a 1 in 200 chance of getting an EX weapon or getting an LD weapon that you're after. And then the burst weapon features across multiple banners, but the rate of them is 0.1% or 3% if you're doing a multi-pull. So it's rare. Like, it's very, very difficult, which is why a lot of people, myself included, recommend against chasing bursts unless you are absolutely certain you have to have that character's burst. Whether it's because they're super powerful or if they're a favourite character of yours, they are the only ones you should realistically be chasing bursts on, unless you have a gargantuan amount of resources saved up. When it comes to pitying, LDs cost 300 G tokens or 75,000 gems, exactly the same as EX weapons do, and EX weapons don't go down in G token price either. They're still 300. They're still 300 G tokens as well. Burst weapons are 500, so that's 125,000 gems. If you are absolutely 100% certain you have to have a character's burst weapon, then be prepared to sink gems into it. Like, there's a roughly 50% chance as well that you will have to pity it. It's a really high chance that, you know, even with 125,000 gems, you may not get the burst and the LD. It's actually very difficult. So going after the LD is perfectly fine because it's the same rates as what we've been pulling for this whole time. The only addition really with new characters or characters that you maybe didn't have it for before is that you're going to have to chase down the EX as well as the ALD. So it's slightly more difficult, but it's not as bad as it sounds. The burst weapon, however, is going to be very difficult, but luckily we do have alternate methods of getting them. So you get burst tokens by clearing chaos challenges if you are wanting to put money into the game and get the premium mod pass. There's those ways of getting it. If you pull a burst or that you weren't after, or a duplicate burst of one you do already have, you can sell them for 5 burst tokens, which will save up towards 50 burst tokens to then put into a character that you absolutely have to have if you didn't pull for them already. And then EX weapons, you can also use the premium mod pass as well to get an EX from the EX shop that you wanted as well. But LDs have no alternate methods of getting them. So if you're going for a character's new kit and you want their LD and their EX, then make sure you prioritize the LD above all else. Now, in terms of actually doing the pulling for a burst or LD, or let's say that we want to pull for an entire character's full kit. Now, the slide that was given to us by Square Enix actually displays the timeline for Squall and what we're pretty sure is Shantotto's bursts across the month of August. So as you can see here, Squall's burst is featured not only in his own banners, but as well as Garland's LD banner and the Amidatelian banner that will follow shortly after. Now, Squall's burst is featured in all of those banners. His LD, however, is not. His LD is only featured in his own banners. So basically, it's going to be a slightly different pulling strategy to what we're used to in order to try and maximize efficiency on our resources. So I'm actually not going to use Squall as my example for this. I'm going to use an example of a character that I'm pretty sure everyone knows that I'm going to want to go in for, which is Kuja. Now, Kuja is released in a couple of months' time, and he will come out alongside a bunch of EXs, and then he's also going to be featured on Gao's Lost Chapter, as well as Gladiolus's new character event. Now, I would really like to get Kuja's Burst, Kuja's LD, and Gladiolus's kit. I'm not so fussed about Gao. As much as he's still very good, he's not a character that's on my radar. Now, if I want Gladio's LD and I go all in on Kuja's Burst banner the day that it comes out and I go crazy, I pity everything there is, I've just spent 200,000 gems pitying Kuja's LD and his Burst, I go in on Gladiolus's banner and first ticket happens, Kuja Burst pops out. I'm going to feel really stupid. So you're going to have to kind of gauge it a little bit differently. So the way that I plan to do pulling, and obviously this is my method of doing it, and I don't necessarily mean that everyone has to do the same thing as me, but this is what most comes sensibly to me, is Kuja's Burst banners pop up the day it comes out. LD is only featured on these banners, but his Burst is featured in future ones. So I am going to try to ticket Kuja's LD from one of these banners. If I get any EXs along the way, fantastic. If I get Kuja's Burst along the way in the very unlikely event that would happen, also fantastic. So I've got Kuja's LD and not his Burst. At this point, I will stop pulling and I will wait until after Gladio's LD banner comes out. So let's say the Gladio LD comes out. I put buttloads of resources into it and I get Gladio's LD and his EX, but I haven't got Kuja's Burst still. What's the best plan of action then? Well, this depends entirely on where I've spent my resources and where I have the least of everything else. So if I go with exactly what I'd said, I spent tickets on Kuja's original banner for LD, and I spent gems on Gladiolus's LD banner, then I would probably go in on whichever banner I had spent the most on in terms of gems, and therefore had the most G tokens for, because in the unfortunate eventuality that I would have to pity Kuja's burst at that point, I can then do so with a slightly reduced pain threshold of having to do so, because I've already spent out on that banner to get Gladio. And then if I need either that, or I would go in on whichever banner I had the least EXs on. If I like, that would be like the tiebreaker situation if I'd spent equal resources on both. Now, the other thing to bear in mind here, and the thing that's very, very important, and I really cannot stress this enough because I really don't want people to be upset about the fact that they've gotten a burst and not been able to get an LD, is if you're gonna do what I've just said, make sure you do it on the first day that that last banner comes out, and make sure you keep an eye on when that first banner leaves, because you do not want to be in a situation where you go, okay, I'm going to do this strategy, I've like planned everything out, I know where my tickets are going, I know where my gems are going, you go to pull for that last banner, you get the rest of the kit, but you didn't get the LD from the first one, and you've lost it. You've got that burst, and you've lost the LD. Now, that's a very bad situation. LDs without bursts are actually totally fine. Like, even characters that have bursts are still very functional with just their LD and not their burst. So you've got their EX Plus as their highest equipped weapon, you've got their LD, you've got the ability from it, you maybe even wanted to use the skin from the LD weapon because you thought it was prettier, but you had to sell it because it's not as strong as the EX Plus, you can still use the skin for it. But then you've got the skill, and that's the bit that matters. With the burst, the base, like that is at least initially considered to be more of a luxury item, at least at the beginning of its life cycle. That will change later, and I will come to that in a little while. But employing this particular pulling strategy, in my eyes, is an efficient way to get everything that you need from each of the banners. So instead of like, should you pull on one banner, it's kind of now a should you pull on 3 or 4 banners, because you kind of need to go, okay, I want this character's burst, but I also want this other character's LD. So I'm going to go get the LD from the first banner, wait until the second one, grab the LD from that banner and the EX if it's a new character, and then gauge which of these banners I actively want to pull the burst for the original character from. So the last thing that I want to talk about before we end this video is some questions that I've been given over the past few days regarding LDs and bursts that I kind of wanted to address. Now, the first question that I get a lot are there characters with their full kit, their burst, their LDs that I should be watching out for in the near future? And the answer is probably yes. Like, I mean, there are no outright bad characters with bursts. They're like, none of them are unusable. They've all got their uses. They've all got a lot of power behind them. Just consider the fact that the burst is essentially a second summon. Like, having a burst is always going to be better than not having one. That being said, there are certain characters on the horizon that a lot of people are very excited for due to their power level as well as who they are, and some of those characters include Noctis, who comes out probably September time and will come out with Odin's banner, also Odin's summon boards, and he's exceptionally powerful. Like, basically, he will trigger the HP plus warp strike that he has now after literally anything anybody does, and you're going to want his entire kit. So if you're saving for any particular character right now and you're thinking, ooh, maybe I'll go all in on Squall, then maybe hold off and perhaps wait for Noctis, because he's one of the more sort of recent or more near future characters to come out. And then following Noctis is Ardyn, who is also very powerful, and his LD and burst kind of provide him with really powerful warp strike effects in a similar way to Noctis, but while also making it so that Ardyn can't die. So basically he reduces his HP to 0, and during the time where he has the buff that allows him to do so, you literally cannot kill him, and he's churning out damage like nobody's business. Other characters that other people are very, very excited for include Lightning, who will come out a little bit later, and basically her turn efficiency is absolutely backbreaking. The amount of free skills she gets, it's absolutely crazy. Then you have Cloud, who gets a rework, and being Cloud, he's obviously going to garner a lot of attention, but his LD is Blade Beam and has delay in its kit, and then his burst is also very powerful. So not only that, but then Paladin Cecil is actually a character which also makes my heart sing. I'm actually very, very excited for Kuja, as we will know, but it turns out he's actually really very powerful by providing Holy Imperil and a Holy Enchant to the party, but it's like an enhanced one. and his LD does so much damage. He can one-shot summon board Ifrit with it, and he will, like, there's a lot of reasons that I'm really into Kuja for many, many reasons. But yes, there are plenty of characters coming out in the future who are after their bursts and are after their full kits more than others. So Squall, while he gets a magnificent rework down the line, you can skip him now and wait for that rework to pull for him then if you wanted to. Next question I get asked an awful lot is, when does X character, Zell, often get their burst weapon? The answer is they're probably not going to. So basically the best way to gauge which characters are most likely to get a burst is to go and have a look at the EX shop that is currently, or that was available, that you could trade in like your DE order tokens from, because that banner lists all of the kind of protagonists of each game that they've come from. So if they're a protagonist or main character from any of the games, so Final Fantasy 1 through to 15, or Ace from Type 0, Ramza from Tactics, Ramza has actually already had a burst in JP, so we know that he's getting one. So if he's getting one, there's a lot of hope for other characters like Lan and Rain, Yuna, Zack, Vincent, etc. There's a lot of scope for other characters to get them. Similarly, only antagonists or the main villains from each of the games are going to get one, from 1 all the way up to 15, and possibly if they get released some of the spin-off games, things like that. I'm still kind of hoping that we get sort of Tactics main villains released. I mean, Ultima would be cool, but it's very unlikely. But that being said as well, like FF10, which character's going to get the burst? Is it going to be Jecht? Is it going to be Seymour? No one knows just yet. The chances are that every character is going to get an LD eventually, but not every character is going to get a burst. Next question I've been asked a few times, and it's something that comes up an awful lot on my streams actually, is everyone says that I need to pull for just the LD and not the burst. Is this true? It's a difficult question, this one, but the answer is yes at the moment. Because at the dawn of any new power creep, you will often find that the first few versions of these weapons or characters or whatever the gacha game presents come about are usually seen as a luxury item, and there's something that is bragging rights. People want to pull for these things so they can go, oh, I got this shiny new thing. But ultimately, at least initially, you're not going to need it to clear content. However, this is not going to stay true forever. We've not long in JP had things like the boss rushes come about. They've got their new dimensions in, the Transcendence, which is like very difficult compared to what we have now. Lufenia missions, things like that are coming about now in JP. They are going to want you to have bursts at some point. Whereas now, at least in Global, we still only have Chaos difficulty. So honestly, Chaos difficulty is something that we've been able to finish with just EX weapons, but having LDs and even bursts is obviously going to help that a great deal. But as time progresses, bursts are going to become more necessary to clear hard content than they are now. So it's prudent to kind of sit there and go, yes, I want to change to the LD and not a burst necessarily, because I know that it's very difficult to get a burst and my resources may not be able to keep up with it. But that is true of the mentality of not wanting to get every burst. Like, getting every burst is quite unlikely. It can happen, of course it can, and then obviously with, you know, burst tokens and dupe bursts and things like that being able to help you get other bursts as well, it is possible to get more bursts than you anticipate due to even though the rates are as low as they are. So prioritizing the LD, definitely a good idea. Completely going, oh, I'm just not going to pull for a burst at all, that might become problematic later on, because trying to get them, at least trying to get the ones that you know are going to be really powerful or ones for your favorite characters, as much as there's no wrong answer on which bursts you need to pull for or which ones you want to go for, and going for them all is relatively unrealistic, trying to get one at least at some point is going to benefit you. It's a second summon. It's going to put in the work, and it's going to put out the damage output. Characters like Noctis, like Lightning, they're going to have these really powerful party-wide bonuses. Even Furion's got a fantastic burst, burst party effect as well. They're all going to be relevant as time progresses. So while I think, yes, pulling for the LD and not the burst is prudent in terms of salvaging resources, it's not going to stay that way forever. The last question I'm going to touch on here is going to be, where can I find more information on LDs and bursts after this video? Now, as I say at the beginning of all my videos, there are tons of websites and content creators out there that are going over very similar topics to what I've stated today. Although I do like, Dissidia Info's got loads of stuff on it. If you want to check out all of the weapons individually and what they do, then Dissidia DB is going to have all of their stats and their listings and what they do, how they perform, what they do for the character, what the party-wide burst is. So if you're wanting to be a bit prudent and look forward to the future and see which ones that you can do, you can either take a look at like the Future Pulse video that I posted like quite a long time ago, and as I approach the end of that timeline, I will make another one. Or you could go to Dissidia DB, have a look at your favourite character that you know has a burst, and then or LD, and check out exactly what it does and do the research for yourself. And then with the Tombury Troop, I actually wanted to highlight this incredible infographic, which is way too big for my screen. So while I'm showing it on here, you're not going to be able to see everything, but I'm going to link it down in the description box below as well for you guys to look at it, because it's like a one-stop shop for everything to do with LDs, bursts, MOG passes, all that good stuff. I definitely encourage you to check that out as well. And that's it. That's everything I have for you on LD and burst weapons. I hope that this has helped you guys either identify exactly what LD and burst weapons are, like work out exactly how equipping them goes, or working out how to pull for them and giving yourself a strategy on how to obtain your characters in the most painless way possible. Not that it's ever going to be painless for any of us, I assume. And also just answering a few questions and letting people know some answers of where they can look for other stuff, or how they can look out for things in the future, all sorts of stuff like that. So I hope you guys have enjoyed the video and that it's been helpful to you. Don't forget to let me know in the comments below who you're planning on going on. If you have a different pulling strategy to mine, I'd love to hear it and to hear about what you guys plan to do when it comes to pulling for your favourite characters' bursts. Who are your favourite characters that are getting a burst, and who are you looking forward to most? Let me know either on Discord or in the comments below, anything like that. I love hearing from you guys. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and of course ring that bell for notifications on any videos that I'll be making in the future. And always on Twitch, I will be making sure to stream every event, including Schools Burst and LD banners and everything that comes with it, every time an event comes out, so be sure to come and find me on there as well. Anyways, that's going to be it from me for today. Thank you ever so much for joining me, and I hope to see you in the next video or stream. Take care everyone, bye bye.